To educate as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that anyone can learn. My name is McCann, and recently I've been asked about my own educational philosophy. At first, I didn't really know where to start, but I've been increasingly inspired by this quote by Bell Hooks and her own personal beliefs about education. Also, how I can implement thinking like this into my own classroom and within my own educational philosophy. Bell Hooks said, "To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we are to create the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin." Although my educational philosophy is still developing and will continue to develop throughout my teaching career, I aspire to create a diverse and collaborative learning environment in which encourages collaboration and acceptance for all students, as well as nurtures student curiosity and interests. The purpose of education is to transform students' thinking and equip them with knowledge needed in order to problem solve and think critically, along with being prepared for life outside of an educational setting. Education is a form of social transformation and is important in order for us to stop the reproduction of society's outdated ideas, such as stereotypes and exclusion. When thinking about my own educational philosophy, I've been struggling to find a way in which to explain my own personal ideas surrounding education. So I thought, why not use the classroom? So today I'll be explaining my own personal educational philosophy by building my own hypothetical classroom. First, I will be adding a door to my classroom. I will encourage my students to use education in order to open doors for their future and nurture their passions and curiosities in order to encourage students to continue on after school with a passion for lifelong learning. Next, I will be adding windows to my classroom to represent how each student is affected by external factors in which have an influence on each student's ability and readiness to learn, including influences such as background, socioeconomic status, and emotional well-being. After this, I will be adding desks to my classroom in order to represent the foundations of knowledge in which I will be striving to arm my students with. I will do this by planning my classes well and preparing myself with knowledge of the content in which I am teaching to prepare my students fully to succeed outside of a school setting. Next, I will be including chairs into my classroom in order to represent how I will encourage each student to have a collective responsibility for the emotional conditions in the classroom, including the acceptance of each individual and social justice issues, as well as understanding of differences in the classroom. Next, I will add a whiteboard to the classroom. The whiteboard will represent how I will encourage my students to work collaboratively in order to share knowledge and understanding collectively. I will then be adding a clock to the classroom in order to represent the limited time in which I have in order to touch these students' educational lives, and build a supportive, encouraging relationship with each student in order to foster their interest and unique ideas. After this, I will add a backpack. This backpack will represent how each of my students will bring their own personal experiences with them into the classroom. I will then add a world map to my classroom in order to represent how I'll help encourage my students no matter what culture, religious, or indigenous background, as well as my willingness to implement teaching strategies in which will guide students' learning through struggles such as English as a second language. I will encourage my students' acceptance in their classroom with the elimination of discrimination and exclusion by educating my students about different cultures, traditions, and values, as well as embedding Indigenous teachings into the core of my curriculum. Next, I will be including books in my classroom. These will represent how I will be using knowledge in order to transform student thinking, as well as ensuring that there will be a balance between traditional and transformative texts in my lessons. I will add a calendar to my classroom in order to represent how I will plan for each class to ensure that teachers meet both curriculum needs and the interests of students. This calendar represents how I will plan my classes with both a clear learning goal and the ability to adapt to student influence. The last thing that I will be adding to my classroom is a laptop. I will use this computer to both communicate with parents and colleagues as well as keeping up with my own educational knowledge. Now that being said, the student is indefinitely more important than the subject matter. In my own educational philosophy, I will be striving to emphasize the importance of emotional well-being in my class, not just the curriculum, but also focusing on factors such as background, student interest, and the well-being of each student.